A sudden, strange tingling sensation surged through her chest, burning her cheeks and making her fingertips tremble slightly. Cried into his arms. It's so hot. Shin Ming-shu slowly opened her eyes, her gaze hazy and unfocused. She glanced around at the surrounding scenery, artificial hills, pavilions, small bridges over flowing streams. It looked just like the backyard of some wealthy family. Didn't she die? How come she's here? The next instant, a strange tingling sensation suddenly surged in her chest, burning her cheeks and making her fingertips tremble slightly. And my body felt incredibly weak, with absolutely no strength left at all. Shen Ming's heart suddenly exploded with a loud boom. This familiar reaction. It's an aphrodisiac. How could she possibly not remember? At the age of 16, she was poisoned at a banquet. Sensing something was wrong, she immediately left the venue. But unexpectedly, she ran into Zhao Zhang, the boy who'd been her childhood sweetheart. He led her into the house to rest and simultaneously instructed someone to fetch a doctor. However, shortly after entering the house, he was discovered by someone. Although nothing had actually happened between the two, their clothes were disheveled, and her reputation was ruined. She had no choice but to marry Xiao Zhang. On the day of their wedding, Xiao Zhang took Lin Qingyan into his home, and from then on, he treated her with cold indifference. Later, she was even driven to the point of committing suicide by stabbing herself with a knife. Xin Mingshu came to her senses and realized that the dryness and heat inside her body were becoming increasingly pronounced. She let out a soft hum. She simply couldn't take it anymore, and trembled as she bit down gently on the corner of her tongue. Hiss, that hurts. However, she clearly felt that the dizziness and burning sensation creeping into her heart had eased somewhat, and her mind was barely able to function again. In this lifetime, she can no longer meet Xiao Zhang again. She's looking for someone else. A figure flashed through her mind. The man had handsome features and delicate eyebrows and eyes, yet his pupils were incredibly dark and profound. When he looked at someone, it always left the other person feeling breathless, the sense of oppression. He is the adopted son of the Shen family, their elder brother, Zhang's son. Her parents passed away when she was 4 years old, and ever since she could remember, it had been him who had been supporting the Shen family's reputation. He was so meticulous as to be almost exacting if she so much as made the slightest faux pas. He'd give her a cold, icy glance, and she'd immediately freeze, too frightened to move a muscle. She never dared to provoke him. For 10 years, she has consistently kept her distance from him. At the age of 17, he passed the imperial examination with top honors and was appointed to the Grand Secretariat. Only then did the declining Shen family once again rise to prominence and establish a solid foothold in the capital. It was also he who, after her death, carried out a bloody massacre of the Xiao family to avenge her. Thinking about this, Shan Mingshu felt a stinging in her eyes and suddenly felt like crying. The wind picked up and a cool breeze brushed against her sweat-dampened hairline. Shan Mingshu opened her eyes and saw that the path ahead wound its way in a serpentine curve. In her previous life, she took this path and ultimately fell into Zhao Zhang's hands, her reputation utterly destroyed. This lifetime, Shen Mingshu turned around miserably and walked away in the opposite direction without looking back. The medication's effects are kicking in again. My vision starts to spin, and the path ahead seems blurry. Shen Mingshu bit her lower lip and walked step by step toward the west courtyard where Zhangzhen lived. She had no one else she could trust, not someone who would harm her. The western courtyard was shrouded in night, and the sound of the wind swept through the hall. Shen Mingshu stood before the dark wooden door, her heart pounding like a drum. She reached out her hand. Knock, knock. The two brief, sharp knocks seemed to strike her chest as well, each one a dull, throbbing ache. The door opened with a sound. Still that cold, handsome face, deeply sculpted features and an air of icy elegance. Even just standing quietly, it inspires a profound sense of awe. Shen Mingshu raised her head and met his deep, dark eyes. Her eyes immediately turned red around the rims. That's him, it really is him. just finally seeing him again. The weakness and discomfort brought on by internal dryness and heat, coupled with the resentment and heartache in her heart, finally became too much for her to bear any longer. She just burst out, clinging into his arms. Brother, she called his name with a heavy nasal tone, her voice trembling violently, and tears streamed down her face in a torrent. Burning hot. While staying at the Shen family, Zhangzhen was strict with her, yet she never once suffered any injustice. After marrying Xiao Zhang, she ended up experiencing all the grievances she had never endured in her entire previous life. As she cried, she kept staring at Zhangzhen. She misses him so much, really. He misses him so much. Zhang Zhan was caught off guard when she suddenly threw herself into his arms. He looked down at her. She was naturally delicate and fair. Her skin is smooth and delicate as snow, with a barely perceptible hint of pink. Now, her eyes were red minus rimmed from crying, and even the tip of her nose was flushed red. Her eyelashes were damp and stuck together, her cheeks had a faint blush, and her lips were strikingly vivid in color. When I looked up at him, she seemed like a crumpled blossom blown down by the wind, trembling on the verge of falling, utterly forlorn and pitiful. Zhangzhen felt a jolt in his heart, as if something had gripped him tightly. His hand paused mid-minus air, neither falling nor rising. It merely drew slightly inward. What's wrong? His voice was low and calm. Ming Shu, tell me. It was just a few brief words, yet to Shen Mingshu's ears, they felt like a heavy hammer blow. She suddenly started crying even harder. Ooh, woo woo, how can he be so nice? Tears simply couldn't be stopped. Every bit of resentment and bitterness that had been hidden deep within my heart poured out in this moment. She had heard this sentence in her previous life as well. On the day of her wedding visit to her husband's family, Zhongzhen stood in the corridor, gazing at her with a tenderness in his eyes that she had never seen before. At that time, his voice was extremely hoarse, and he asked her the same question. But at the time, she still harbored secret feelings for Xiao Zhang and didn't tell him the truth. It wasn't until later that I realized, if I had spoken up, perhaps many things wouldn't have happened. Shen Mingshu cried uncontrollably, tears rolling down one by one and dripping onto his lapel. In a past life, she had traveled together with Xiao Zhang and Lin Qingyan to Yongqing Temple to offer incense. On their way back, they encountered a group of horsemen. The bandits blocked the road. That group was a notorious band in the Jianghan region. Despite several attempts by the authorities to round them up, they repeatedly managed to escape. They specialized in kidnapping and drugging the wives of officials, committing rape, murder, and all kinds of heinous crimes. Her face instantly turned deathly pale, and almost instinctively, she grabbed the sleeve of Xiao Zhang's robe. But in the next instant, a crossbow bolt shot out from among the horse bandits. Lin Qingyan screamed and clutched her gaff, blood instantly staining her dress red. Xiao Zhang's face turned pale. He quickly turned around, shielding Lin Qingyan in his arms, never once looking back at her, and hurriedly led her away. She fell into the hands of horse bandits, and all the guards around her were killed. The gang of horse bandits swarmed forward and roughly seized her. The fat bandit chuckled. What a lovely minus-looking girl, let's take her back and pamper her good. She struggled desperately, her fingernails digging into the palm of her hand. She knew that if she fell into the hands of these people, there would be only one outcome worse than death. Then she might as well just die. Biting her teeth, she took advantage of the moment when the horse bandits loosened their grip slightly and charged straight into the sharp, long swords in their hands. After death, her ghost wandered the human world for 7 days. The day after her death, Zhangzhen submitted a memorial directly to the emperor, listing Xiao Zhang's crimes of embezzling military funds, engaging in corruption for personal gain, and covering up banditry. She saw him standing in the imperial court, angrily rebuking Xiao Zhang. His face was flushed with rage, his eyes bloodshot, and several times he nearly lost control of his emotions. 3 days later, an imperial edict was issued. The entire Xiao family was exiled and conscripted into military service, to be imprisoned in the northern frontier. In just one night, Everyone from the Xiao family died tragically in prison. After that, the main army closed in, and all those horse bandits were executed. Zhang Zan returned to the Shen family alone, going back to the boudoir where she had once lived. He just sat there quietly, staring into space for a long time. Her eyes immediately turned red. This was the first time she had ever seen Zhang Zan looking so despondent. She reached out to touch him, but her hands passed right through his body. How could she forget Chess a ghost after all? Later on, he just kept drifting and drifting right up until the 7th night. It was snowing heavily that day, and she saw him walking out of the house all by himself. In the suburbs of Beijing, he was surrounded by people. Those people were masked, and a sword pierced straight through his chest. Blood was spilled all over the ground. He spread out his hand, and in his palm he still clutched a hairpin, her hairpin. Xiao Mingshu suddenly opened her eyes, her thoughts snapping back from her previous life. She looked at Zhang Zan standing before her, and the image of him dying in the snow just moments ago still lingered in her mind. Before I had time to think, I immediately raised my hand and placed it over his chest. Right here, where the sword pierced through. Her fingertips trembled incessantly, yet the strength in her hand was anything but weak. If there really is a sword wound here, HED definitely react if you press down like this. Zhang Zan was stunned, completely unprepared for her to react this way. Immediately afterward, his throat twitched uncontrollably, and he let out a low, muffled grunt. A faint blush appears among the tips of the young bamboo shoots. She gently traced along her slender, delicate neck, climbing all the way up to her temples, in a face that was already cool and reserved. A barely perceptible hint of panic began to show. Mingshu, his voice was slightly hoarse. What's wrong with you? Only then did Shen Mingshu come to her senses and realize what she had just done. Her face instantly turned as hot as fire, and the inner heat surged back again. Her hand still rested on his chest, and through the fabric, she could feel his steady heartbeat. He hastily pulled her hand back and took a step backward, but her legs went weak, nearly causing her to fall. Zhang Zan was quick aside and nimble handed. He reached out to support her waist, gently steadying her. She leaned into his embrace, her nose gently brushing against the crisp ink like scent emanating from him, which calmed her restless heart just a little. Brother, eh? As she bit her lip, unsure of how to put it, Zhang Zan lowered his head. Looking at her red eye sockets and flushed cheeks, his gaze growing darker. He almost instantly understood what was going on. He scooped her up sideways, turned around, and walked into the house. He laid her gently on the bed, then turned to go fetch the doctor. Don't. Shen Mingshu grabbed his sleeve. Don't call the doctor. Zhang Hui turned around and, seeing her panicked expression, frowned slightly. You've been poisoned. You need to call a doctor immediately. No way. Shen Mingshu was so anxious that tears were about to spill. Brother, I can't let anyone find out. Please. Her reputation, her future, these can no longer be ruined. Gyeongsun looked at her, remained silent for a moment, then finally said, Okay. He turned around, splashed some cold water into a basin, wrung out a cloth, and walked back to sit on the edge of the bed, reaching out to wipe her face. Shen Mingshu looked at his face, which was so close to hers that her heart was racing. The heat within her made her instinctively lean a little closer to him. Zhang Xuan's movements paused, and the depth in his eyes grew even darker. He placed the cloth on her forehead and said in a low voice, Bear with it, it'll be over soon. Shen Mingshu bit her lip, nodded, and obediently lay still, letting him take care of her. His movements were gentle, imbued with a subtle and almost imperceptible tenderness. She looked at him and suddenly realized in her past life, she had been so foolish to have kept such a great distance from him. If she had turned around a little earlier, would everything have been different? Zhang Zan noticed she kept staring at him, and his ears subtly turned a faint shade of red. He quickly looked away and stopped it, just lie still. Shen Mingshu couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle, yet tears still fell down her cheeks. In this lifetime, Shall never let him be alone again. She wants to stay by his side and never leave again. Zhang sighed helplessly as he watched her laugh and cry at the same time. He reached out to wipe away her tears, and the warmth of his fingertips brushed against her skin. Both of them froze instantly. The atmosphere inside was ambiguous yet tranquil. The sound of the wind outside the window still remains, yet the person inside the room is long since no longer the same as in a past life.